You are listening to the Amodamar podcast. In this series, Amoda explores her essential teaching through conversation and excerpts from interviews and events. To find out more about events and to sign up for her newsletter, go to www.amodamar.com. Please subscribe, comment and share if this podcast moves you. And if you feel called to donate, please go to the website. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Greetings and welcome to today's episode titled Movement as a Gateway to Presence. In this episode, Amoda is in conversation with Rebecca Hanscom, Director of the School of Ecstatic Movement in the UK. Together they're going to explore the body as a gateway to presence and the role of movement in the awakening process.
Okay, so Rebecca, lovely to speak with you again. We go back a long way. Back when I was living in the UK, in England, we go back probably about 20 years or something, maybe 15, 20 years, something like that. So when I was actually, not many people know this, the founder of the School of Ecstatic Movement. And at some point I handed the reins over to you, and you're now the director of the School of Ecstatic Movement. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what the School of Ecstatic Movement offers, and then we can dive into our conversation.
Okay, great. It's lovely to be here, Amoda, and I'm always excited to share about the School of Ecstatic Movement. Primarily, it is a place where people come to learn about stepping into sacred leadership through the process of transformation that is ecstatic awakening dance. And we've been running now for, I think, since 2007. So quite a long time, and yes, it's a way of coming into your body and finding your home there. So I think that's all I need to say right at the moment about that.
Okay, I'm sure we can unpack that a little bit, and also its relevance to awakening and the spiritual journey. Indeed.
And you, as the founder of the School of Ecstatic Movement, what is your truth about this movement? Ecstatic movement, any type of movement, really.
So, you're asking me what is the role of movement on the spiritual journey, on the transformational journey, on the awakening journey. Well, let's just backtrack a little bit. I mean, I used to teach this method. I know you've adapted it and perhaps expanded it or refined it. When I was teaching it, it was a way of coming into the body, as you said, becoming present in the body, and because the movement, the core of the movement is spontaneous. Yeah, there's no set moves. It's very free flowing. It's spontaneous. It's actually cathartic. Yeah, it was originally a way of both coming into the body and allowing stuck energy to move, because emotional energy gets stuck in the body. And so this was a very cathartic process. It was a way of moving energy, allowing energy to move and to release, and so on. And I would say this is a very absolutely vital component in today's world, where so much of our focus is in the head. Yeah. And many people lost in thought and so on. So really it was a moving meditation. I mean, there's many levels to it, as you know, Rebecca, and I'm sure we're going to touch on some of those levels, the sort of transcendent level, the ecstatic level, and, you know, as well as the emotional catharsis. Perhaps where I am now, I mean, you might well ask, and perhaps listeners will ask, well, why aren't you teaching that anymore? And yeah,
why aren't you teaching anymore, Amanda?
Because I handed it over to you. Because not because I don't think it's an important aspect of the journey of integration, of inner alignment, of emotional release, of emptying the baggage, of opening the heart, of coming into a stillness that is at the core of all movement. All of that is vital. But two things. One is that something happened to me along the way, a much deeper silence. You can call it what I call the awakening out of the dream of the separate self took place somewhere on my personal path, and a deep silence revealed itself to me. And in that silence, all methods, all teaching actually fell away for me. And that's a very personal thing. So I had to really sit in that silence for a long time before the outward movement could reveal itself. And when I say outward movement, I mean the direction of my own life, of anything that I might be offering again. And actually, when that movement took place again, which is a long time later, it didn't have the movement teaching in it, which is when I handed the reins over to you. Yeah. And so now I do find that in speaking with many, or working with many of the people that I work with now as a non-dual teacher, I do find that probably movement would be very helpful, a helpful support system, not for everyone, but certainly for some individuals who may be less in touch with the direct felt sense, who may have a backlog of unexplored or unexpressed emotions that are very difficult to get in touch with, in which case I would hand them right over to you, although you're across the ocean. So there is a place for this. Of course, there's a place for this. But at the same time, yes, it's a fine line. At the same time, I have to say that when I was teaching the movement work, the ecstatic dance, whatever we want to call it, I used to call it ecstatic trance dance at the time, I found that, or I saw, certainly after my own personal awakening, I saw that many people were actually attached to the method and to the cyclical nature of emotional catharsis. It brings a lot of energy to the body. It brings a lot of release to the body. It brings a lot of, that ecstatic to stand outside of oneself, to go beyond oneself. And that can become, I wouldn't call it addictive, but it can become a blind spot where one needs to keep on returning to the process, to the method, in order to know oneself beyond oneself. And so it's a fine line. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, and I totally get that, because there are people that just want to feel the experience of being in an ecstatic state. They want to, be in a group with other people going through that experience, and everything else that goes with that, like how you dress, how you look, what you eat, what music you listen to. And there can be very much that sort of thing going on. But actually what I've found over the years, because I've been doing it for so long now, I think I might have even been doing it almost as long as you did, Amoda, that because my teaching slightly changed, it's really, it doesn't seem quite to be about that anymore. And I attract many more people that are looking for that place of stillness and just relieving the stress in order to be able to get there. And I suppose you could do it with any sort of movement, and movement helps because it manages to get you out of the way enough that you can drop into relaxation and meditation. And for me, definitely that's why I continue to do it on a regular basis.
Yeah, and one of the wonderful, and I think probably central pillars of the teaching or the method that I would certainly incorporate, if possible and when possible, in some of my teaching now, is the shaking meditation, the Kundalini, let's call it meditation, which is what it was originally called, because it has no form to it. It has no really no external expression in the form of movement and dance as the mind would like to, take ownership. It's totally an internal process with the eyes closed. It's an ancient Qigong exercise. It's one of the primary meditations, active meditations of Osho. And as you and many of my listeners know, I was immersed in that for some time, and was a great opening and transformation for me. And so the Kundalini meditation, or the shaking meditation, if we want to strip it of any connotations, is amazing. We, eyes closed, standing still, and just breathing in a circular fashion and allowing the spine to shake. And there is such stress release in that. The nervous system that holds on to so much stress, so much agitation, and all energies that get trapped in the nervous system, in the spine, in the vertebra, in the muscular system, just sort of falls away. It's like a tree shaking in the wind. And that is, I love that meditation. I love it. And it's a beautiful way to enter the inner silence, the inner stillness. So yes, there are some amazing aspects to the work when you take it, out of the context of coming together as a tribe or a community or a sense of belonging, which also has its place in society and in our personal lives. It's just not. It wasn't relevant to what I'm offering now, and. So tell me more. What else? Where else can we go with this conversation?
So I just, we just finished actually yesterday a 21-day shake challenge. And we had like 50 people joining in on that. And we really encouraged them to, we opened a little Telegram group and asked people to post up their experiences, not themselves shaking or anything weird like that, but just their experiences. And so many people, it's exactly what you were saying that they felt so much freer in their body, different tensions and stresses had left. And because they were doing it on their own effectively, they were getting lots of insights. Maybe not so much during the shake, but definitely afterwards, and feeling more calm and more relaxed for the rest of their day. And the shake is amazing. It's just such powerful medicine. So I encourage anyone to do the shake. And
I think one of the important aspects of the shake is the breath. Yeah. The circular breath, the being present in the breath. Yeah. Because that's something that is so many people are unconscious of. Yeah.
Yeah, and that circular breathing technique is something that we use throughout the actual dance, isn't it? Which is really powerful to align the body and align that kind of masculine, feminine energy within ourselves, which helps to just like totally calm down our brains and help us relax and release all those good neurotransmitters. So getting back to the breath, obviously breath is vital for being present and coming into your aliveness. So tell us a little bit about the breath, Amoda.
Yeah, let me just put that into the context of as a starting point, into the context of the non-dual realization, which is really the foundation of my teaching. And I just wanted to sort of say that the reason that we're having this conversation primarily is because in the non-dual arena, and I'm not strictly a non-dual teacher, I like to say I've gone beyond non-duality, but it's certainly the foundation. But in that non-dual arena, the body is not usually a conversation. Yeah. Because of the realization that I am not the body, which is, fundamentally true. Then the body tends to be negated or given no attention and so on. So really that's why we're having this conversation, that yes, we go beyond identification with the body if we want true spiritual realization or freedom. But the body also needs to be included. And so this brings me to the breath. It's like the breath is the link, the bridge between body and no body. Yeah, between the human and the divine, between me and God, between the personal and the absolute. It's a bridge, and like I said a bit earlier, it's mostly an unconscious process. Well, it is, because it's involuntary. It takes place on its own. But when we give no conscious attention to the breath, then the breath becomes very shallow. And it becomes really shallow because most people in the unconscious state or the unaware state are caught up in their heads, caught up in thinking. And when we're caught up in thinking and we're caught up in doing, then the breath becomes very shallow. When the breath is very shallow, then we lose touch with our deeper knowing, our intuition, our gut instinct. We lose touch with an inner alignment and an innate wholeness. We lose touch with an essential life force that is the felt sense of presence, the I amness, that very basic fact of beingness. We can't really know beingness until we're really present. And to be present, then there must be a full felt sense of being here, being alive, in order for us to go even deeper than that into the beingness that is not attached to body. But the body and the breath are a kind of bridge. So the breath is really important. It's also a reflection of the life-death cycle. Let's call it the birth-death cycle. Like on every inhale, we take in life. On every exhale, we let go of life. So it's like the in-breath is the birth into existence, into manifestation, into individuation, into the self that is here as this mind-body vehicle, as this expression. And then the exhale is the dying into the emptiness, dying into the stillness, dying into the no body. So it's a microcosm of an existential truth. And again, once we become conscious of in-breath and out-breath, we sort of naturally come in touch with that existential truth. So we stop being as caught up in the head. So the breath is a powerful gateway.
And what would you say about the body as a gateway?
Well, the body is a gateway for precisely the same reason. Before we can come into deep presence, there is a necessity to be present. There's no other way of saying it. In the body. The body is the body in the sense of not its external form, but the body in its felt sense, the sensations, the feelings, where there's tension, where there's openness, where there's heaviness, where there's lightness, and so on and so on. The body is an external representation of the mind. They go together. So where there's tension or agitation in the mind, then there is tension and agitation in the body, which gets locked in there when that habitual pattern of agitated mind becomes sort of like a groove. So then we experience tension in the body. The being lost in thought can, it can numb us. There can be a numbness in the body where we don't actually really feel anything. And in that numbness might be a kind of cover up for where we don't want to feel. Maybe it's some old hurt or some old grievance, and so on and so on. Very often around the heart area, the chest area, there's a lot of tightness and there's a lot of not feeling. It's kind of like rigid. And, when we breathe and when we come into the body and we start to feel where that tightness is, where that tension is, when there's an energetic kind of opening of the heart, then we might get to actually feel some of the physical energy around the heart as well. Yeah, it's both kind of an invisible energy and a visible energy. Yeah, so the body is definitely a gateway in that way, and in that way, it gets included in the journey or process of awakening, true awakening out of the identification with me. So it's kind of an inclusion and then a going beyond.
Exactly. That sounds, yes. So can emotional catharsis, when we really get into this body movement, support the awakening process? And does kind of movement and body work help with this? At what stage? Yes.
Again, I think when there is a lot of suppressed emotion, places that we have been afraid to meet, to go to, maybe some childhood trauma, or somewhere where we have a lot of fear, a fear of an emotion, or a lot of judgment about an emotion, and that judgment might be unconscious. There might be a well of sadness, and yet sadness is taboo. Or grief is always is often taboo, or a kind of or maybe rage that's been suppressed because we've been told not to be angry, that we've been told to be good, we have to behave ourselves, and so on. Places where we haven't really let go, we haven't allowed the river of feeling, the river of emotion to just flow through us unimpeded. We've kind of put a damper on it, put a kind of defense system against it. So there's a defendedness. And then usually when we're triggered, it bursts out. So these are emotions, and emotion is energy, emotion that get locked into not just our psyche, our psychology, but also our physiology. And that's when catharsis is incredibly valuable. Getting in touch through movement or through body work, through breath work, to get in touch with those darker, so-called darker emotions, so that they can be released, so they can be brought to the surface. So that's valuable. I mean, there is a direct way. I mean, I work directly in inviting that in people through dialogue, through inquiry, through awareness, so that it can go directly to that. But I think for some people, that directness is just too out of reach, in which case this is very supportive. And I know in my life, this has been my background. So I often come across people who say they've had a powerful awakening experience or a non-dual realization, and then there's all this stuff that comes up and they're freaked out. They're frightened, or they're confused. It's like, why is all this pain coming up now? Why are all these old memories coming up now? And sometimes that's a physical energy of incredible heat, or involuntary movements, or just emotions that seem to be dark and overpowering. And they're completely confused or despondent or depressed about the fact that there was this wonderful awakening, this freedom, this realization, and then all this personal stuff comes up. Well, that's where this kind of work that we're talking about, the body work, the movement work, the breath work, is incredibly valuable. For me, this all happened prior to awakening, so it was kind of like emptying the vessel. It wasn't done consciously. I wasn't on a path of awakening. I wasn't looking for a destination. It's just what the intelligence of life was guiding me into. Was a lot of release work, because I held a lot of trauma from my childhood and a lot of stuffed down feelings. And I was totally out of touch with that. So it had to be, when the light, little crack of light sort of opened up, it was like it came pouring through. And so I gave myself fully into a lot of breath work, a lot of movement work, a lot of body work, all the support that I could get to just untangle that, to unravel that, to allow it to be experienced, to be released in a safe way, in a safe container. And that was incredibly valuable, because when awakening did happen on an existential level, it wasn't an experience that just came and went. Yeah. It became abiding, because the vessel had been emptied. As much as a vessel can be, a mind-body vehicle can be emptied. And so it was it had nothing else to stick to. There wasn't anything that came up that took me by surprise. So, but this work can also happen after awakening. There can be a profound awakening experience. And then it's a great time if something overpowering or unexpected or old pain comes up. If there isn't the possibility to just be with it, to sit with it, to meet it without further judgment, without further repression, which can happen, and that's possible, in which case you don't need any more support. But if you can't, because it's just too much, there's too much of it, there's too much baggage that comes up, or there is some kind of overlay of judgment on it, then it's valuable to do this kind of work.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you're saying in part is that having a supportive structure around you, whether that is in body work or in, talking and that direct dialogue, so that you just can have your experience validated, so that you don't feel quite so isolated with it, because it can feel overwhelming otherwise.
Yes, to have that clear reflection that it's okay, that it's just as it should be, that there's a wonderful invitation from the very experience of old emotions coming up to just allow, to forgive, to meet as it is, to be with, to not try and push away, and to not get caught up in that old trick of I've awakened, and so nothing can touch me now. And to have that reflected back by someone who's walked that path already, whether it's through direct dialogue, through direct inquiry, the presence of being with someone that's open as love, or whether it has some kind of modality in it, like what we're talking about, some breath work, some movement therapy, or body work. All of that can facilitate a deeper allowing and flowing into the embodiment of awakening, and not just an awakened experience that comes and goes.
Fabulous. And do you think it like having these expanded states of consciousness are important during awakening, or realizing your true nature?
Well, let me use that as a launch pad to but definitely apart from certain childhood experiences, but the very first transcendent experience or expanded state of consciousness that I experienced as an adult, let's not talk about childhood because that's a little different. But as an adult, I experienced a transcendent dimension when I started long distance running when I was at university, long time ago in the 80s, 1980s. I was a couch potato, right? I didn't like exercise. I didn't like sports. I had no interest whatsoever. I didn't dance. I was very secluded and isolated. So as I went into my early 20s, I was like that. I didn't like any movement at all. And then a number of synchronous occurrences, meetings, a boyfriend I had. Anyway, somehow I got dragged into running and dragged into it more and more until I was able to run up to 22 miles, which was pretty amazing for a couch potato. And I experienced for the first time, because I was so stuck in self, I was so stuck in self-consciousness, I was so stuck in being out of touch with any feeling whatsoever. I was so stuck in my head. I was an intellectual and academic. That's why I wasn't interested in the body or in movement. And this long distance running took me out of that. It was the first glimpse. I had an experience of no self. I had an experience of not being trapped by ego self, me self, and that whole layered identity, which is all I knew. And it was divine. It was mystical. It was ecstatic. It was transcendent. It was beyond the beyond. Now, of course, when I came back after the afterglow, disappeared, I was back to my me self, my ego self. But it's like the light bulb went on. And so, yes, an expanded state of consciousness, whether we call it expanded or transcendent, an experience of a dimension that is beyond the tight shell of me, can be a powerful catalyst. And for me, that became a catalyst. Initially, to look into the relationship between running, long distance running, and any transcendent experience. I mean, I knew it was a spiritual experience, if we want to use that language, although I had no other particular interest in spirituality. But it actually set me off on that path because it led me to transcendental meditation. And, so on and so on. So it was definitely a powerful catalyst. It's a doorway. It's a doorway. And I think that's what the ecstatic awakening dance, or what I used to call ecstatic trance dance, provided. It provided a doorway to experience a state that is beyond the tight shell of ego self, me self, mind self, and all my problems and so on. And it can then take us deeper. So it's a gateway. So yes, I think, and going back to our conversation earlier, I think getting attached to that experience becomes counterproductive. But to allow it to be a doorway is very, very powerful. And that's the same with any kind of shamanic experience or psychedelic experience. It can be a catalyst for a realization that you are not this body. You are not just this body. You are not just this mind. There is a whole dimension of the clear light of consciousness and expanded awareness and a sense of like oneness. That's what I experienced in the long distance running. Was I came back from that running with such a sense of at oneness with the totality. I wasn't disconnected anymore. Whereas prior to that experience, I just felt like this isolated, alienated little me. Yeah.
And it's having experience like that is something that you can never go back on. In some ways, once you've opened to that expansion once, you can't unfeel that experience, I think. And so it is an important step on that awakening. And where would you say, because obviously, I mean, I don't know, but I presume that you still do run often.
Well, actually, I do, but not for the transcendent experience.
Yes, no, I realise that. But obviously to keep your body working, to keep the energy flowing, all of those things, where would you say the point is of like when it becomes like an addiction and when it's actually a useful tool to keep you in good health?
I do run. I don't run the way that I used to, in the sense I'm not doing 22 miles. I'm not looking for any sort of transcendent or, endorphin high from it. I do run, and there's been long periods where I don't run. So it's very flexible now. I mean, there's been years more recently where I've done so much traveling in order to teach and so on that running has been very much in the background. It's something that I pick up and then put down. And, the distances are much shorter. There's no pushing, if you like. There's no trying to achieve any particular pace or so on. Neither is there any sort of agenda around fitness. I don't have a regime that in order to maintain a state of fitness. However, if we boil it down, I just love it. I love the freedom that the body has in being able to run. It's the natural aspects of every animal. And how many hours do we spend sitting? I mean, I spend a lot of time sitting at my desk and sitting and teaching and writing and so on. So I love it. So I do it, but I do it in a very flexible way. It has to be, there is a regularity to it. Otherwise it'd be really difficult to pick it up again. So I do run, and on a well-being level, it just feels natural. I guess there's an integration of mind, body, mind and body that it facilitates. I mean, there's other forms of exercise as well that do, and I pick those up and put those down. So I play with it now, but it's not like I have to. I just love to, to some degree, and there's days where I don't, and I take the dog for a long walk and so on and so on. But it certainly, I find that there is a clarity and foundation of wellness and lightness that comes from being in harmony with the body. The body loves to move. Yeah? And so there's a kind of lightness in that. And there's personally, I feel there's nothing worse than feeling heavy. I'm not talking about physical weight, but a sense of heaviness, a sense of sluggishness. Of course, there can be tiredness. There's tiredness if I travel or, and all the erratic hours, which I don't do much of anymore. So, of course, and even that is okay. I mean, I've been able to teach and be fully present in pretty horrendous situations, sleeping on Chicago airport floor and things like that, and then having to show up at the retreat the next day in the full glory of being a spiritual teacher. But as a general way of life, feeling sluggish or feeling heavy or feeling blocked in some way is something that actually doesn't happen anymore. So the body, whatever attention is given to the body, is in support. It's not for its own end. It's in support of, well, for me anyway, it's in support of being able to be of service. The more wellness and well-being and overall lightness on all levels of being, mind, body, emotion, then the more I can serve, the more energy I have to be fully here. And there is much doing these days. I'm teaching a lot and so on and so on. And so all of it is in support. And there's also an innate wisdom, an innate intelligence. The body has its own innate intelligence. And so everything is guided by that. It tells me when to move. It tells me when to rest. It tells me what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, and so on. So it's not overridden by the mind and any idea of having to follow any regimen or anything like that.
It's just the natural flow of what happens because I suppose what you're saying is when you are in service to, whatever that is, the greater picture or the greater unfoldment of something, your body is included in that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right relationship with your body as well as everything else.
Absolutely. If the body was completely ignored, and I don't see how it could be, because, like I said, innate intelligence is alive and present in everything. So even though I am not the body, this body appears within the no bodiness. So it's ludicrous to deny that. It's in support of this. It's included. There's no separation from that.
And is that part of is that negation of the body part of what is called spiritual bypassing?
Yes. I mean, it's an interesting little dilemma. It's kind of quite a fine line, a razor's edge, where there isn't really an absolute answer to this. There are incredible, amazing teachers, both modern day, but mostly in the traditional realm. I mean, we can look at Chogyam Trungpa, who by all means was an alcoholic, drank himself to death. There are other teachers that I won't name who don't really have a concern about the wellness of the body. Either there is sickness there, or sickness arrives at some point, some illness, or difficulty, or perhaps there's a sort of just a sort of attention is not given to that. And then the body has its own karma, or certain habits of eating and so on. There's no concern for it. I know teachers who love sweet things, and so then that gives a tendency towards diabetes, and then has its own impact. And yet the clarity of consciousness, the clarity of wisdom, the clear seeing, the capacity to be a reflection, the embodiment of true nature as love is not impeded by that. So I'm not saying it's an obstacle. There can be true realization and living as that love, even when the body is in some way neglected or impaired or something. And at some point, this body will as well. It'll get old, and who knows what might happen. But the certainly aging process will take over in some ways. And this is where the fine line is, the fine dance. In order to be truly of service, certainly from my perspective, I can only speak about myself. I find it a holistic experience. In order for this mind-body vehicle to be a useful vessel, then all of it is included. Yeah, there isn't a separation in that. Yeah, and also, like I just said, there's an innate intelligence that is love that guides it, and I can't deny that. Yeah, I can't deny that, and this is the way it's guiding this vehicle. So it's a tricky question. It's a tricky question. Is there spiritual bypassing in those teachers? And some of them are, like I say, very profound and respected and, benevolent and valuable teachers of our times and previous to our times. Is there an element of spiritual bypassing there in negating the body? Or is it irrelevant? Or was it irrelevant, but we're now moving into a more holistic way of living that does bring this conversation? I mean, my whole teaching is based on the embodiment of awakening. In other words, the filtering in of awakened consciousness into every aspect of life.
Yeah.
And I can't see any area of life that should be negated or denied.
Yeah, because it feels to me like it's much more, like you say, holistic now than the teachings that are coming through now, especially yours, Amoda, is about, living in that right relationship with everything, isn't it? The body, the environment, what you do in the world, how you are in service. And it comes down to all aspects to do with the planet as well, because all of these things, when you're working in alignment with yourself, have their natural flow, exactly like you said.
Yes, absolutely. And everything, every form, every individuation, everything that expresses and manifests itself as part of the human life, the human experience, this earthly experience, is held in the light of love, which means the way that we hold it, the way that we relate with it, the way that we meet it, and the way it speaks back to us. Yeah, our capacity to listen. All of it is imbued with this intelligence, and that's what guides it.
Beautiful. I'm just sitting with that.
Yes, I can feel that. Yes, I can feel that. That wonderful paradox of being in the body, but not of the body. Yeah, being fully present in the body. There's no denial, there's no bypassing. Whether there's pain or whether there's whether there's lightness, whether there's heaviness, whether there's lightness, however it is, right here in this body. And yet not deriving our identity from that. Yeah. I'm not bad because there's tension. I'm not, good because there's lightness and well-being. It just is the way that it is. And in that isness, there is light. Yeah, there is light even in the tension. There is light even in the pain. There is light even in the suffering or illness. It's our ability to just simply be very tender, very open, very allowing of what is felt, of what is here. And that includes everything. Physical, emotional, it's all one. And then somehow we have gone beyond. We've gone beyond me as this body and deriving my identity from it. If it's perfect, then I'm worthy or good enough. And if it's imperfect, then there's something wrong with me. No. No more identity being derived. We've gone beyond. So in this way, the being fully present in the body becomes the gateway to freedom, gateway to love, gateway to presence. So, Rebecca, perhaps this is a good place to end our conversation for now.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I just feel really in my body, but not a part of it. And it's been wonderful being able to connect with you today, Amoda. So thank you for inviting me here to talk.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me all the way from the British Isles.
Oh.
Beautiful. And I wish you all the best with the good work that you're doing there in continuing the School of Ecstatic Movement and offering what you do in the unique way that you do.